Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to the New Brit Workshop and this first video about template work with a router. And in this first video, I'm going to talk about the basic kit you need, the geometry of it all, which is very important, and also I'll try and point out those little poo traps that you can fall into if you go about it the wrong way. And this will be followed by two more videos, the first of which will be how to make your own templates, and the second will be how to make a template using a CNC machine. Now, in this video, I will be showing you how to inset a piece like this into another piece of work. And this is just a simple example. More detailed examples will come in videos 2 and 3. And you need to note my nomenclature. This I'm calling a hole, and the thing that fits in it exactly is the plug. So plug, hole. Now let's first look at the basic kit. We're talking about router work, so of course you need a router. I've got my lovely little Festool OF1010. It's got a 1/4 inch collet in, and this is what I tend to use most when I'm doing inlay work of any description. It's very easy to handle, dust collection is superb. Now in the base of my router I've got a guide bush holder, and this is one that came with the Lee jig kit, and this is a 704R. Already installed in this router is a guide bush, and that guide bush comes from a set which I bought many years ago from Axminster. It's the UJK metric guide bush set, and it's got a range of guide bushes going from 10mm all the way up to 30, and it's metric. And now it's really important that you don't try and mix your units of measurement, and so I'm all metric throughout all of my template work. And I've got a set of 7, there's one missing, it's in the router right now, 7 metric cutters. And they're on 1/4 inch shanks. I said I wasn't mixing units, but the shanks are 1/4 inch. But they're 4mm, 5mm. The 6mm one is in the router right now. Then I go 7, 8, 10 and 12mm. That gives me a range of cutter sizes, and you'll see how important that is in a minute. And these come from the professional range sold by Trend. Now we're talking about template work, and for this first video I'm going to be using a template which I bought from Axminster, and it's a basic circle template, and it's got various circles cut out in this bit of acrylic, ranging from 30 all the way up to 85mm in diameter, and I'll be using the 60mm one in the example in this video. And the other thing, of course, is that your template may be female, as this one is, or it could be a male template whereby you're cutting on the outside of it. So there are two different ways. And you may have noticed I've got this on my bench. This is a mandrel. It's used for centering a guide bush on a router, and I will show that in use in a few minutes' time. The other two things I've got, you may need to use something like a digital gauge like this one, which is very useful if you've not got any other means of checking the depth of your router. And this one I think came from Trend, and it's not too expensive. If you're looking for a Christmas present, get yourself one of those. And of course, ear defenders when you use a router, and a dust extractor connected to your router. Now, I'm afraid in order to really understand this type of template work, you do need to understand the geometry, and that's what I'm going to go through now. And this is going to be a little bit like going back to school. So Jenkins, stop playing with your comb, and Johnson, put that mobile phone away. Right, now listen carefully. The first thing that's important to understand is the offset. If you've got your workpiece, you've got your template, you've got your router to which is fixed the guide, and in the router is the cutter. And when you start cutting, there will be a difference between the outside of the cutter and the inner edge of the template. This is assuming that you're cutting on the inside of a template rather than the outside. So that's the offset, and that's the difference between the edge of the cut and the edge of the template. And that, of course, if you're doing a circle, is on both sides, or if you're doing any shape that joins back to itself, that is on both sides. Now, you'll need to do this yourself. I've done it for my cutters and my guide bushes. I've made up a table, and my table shows me the offsets for each combination of cutter and guide bush. And for my range of cutters, I've got 7 cutters in all, and I've got 8 guide bushes. You get offsets which are shown on this diagram now. Now, it makes a difference whether you're cutting on the inside of a template or on the outside of a template. And so I've got 2 tables. This first table shows you cutting on the inside of a template, which is the example using this circle template here. And that means everything's done on the inside of the template. But it may be that your template is a male template rather than a female one. It may be something big and you're cutting all the way around the outside. And so I've got a second table that shows the offsets for a male template. And in both these cases, they cover my full range of cutters and my full range of guide bushes. So, Jenkins, using a 60mm circle template and a 24mm guide bush and an 8mm cutter, what size hole do we create? Well done, it is 44mm because it's the diameter of the template, which was 60. Take away twice the offset. 8 times 2, which is 16. 16 away from 60 is 44. With that combination producing a hole which is 44mm in diameter. Now, with the same arrangement, in order to create the plug that goes in the hole, this piece here, we then change to a 6mm cutter and a 10mm guide bush. And you'll see there the offset is exactly the same from the table. It's 8mm. So again, it's 60 minus 8 times 2. So it's 60 minus 16, which is 44. And so with that, you can cut a 44mm diameter plug. Let's see that in action. I'll go through the whole process of setting everything up. Now, centering the guide bush is quite important. You know, the screws aren't done up, but you can see there's plenty of play there. So I've put the mandrel in the collet and tightened the collet up, so the mandrel is there. And that means now, when I raise this up, the sloped surface, which you can see here, the angled surface of the mandrel is now causing the guide to be centered. And once you've got it in that position, it's centered, you can then tighten it up. Gently tighten it up to start with. And once both screws are almost there, then put your thumb on top of the mandrel and your fingers underneath the router base to pull the base up towards the mandrel as you do the final tightening. So that now has got that guide bush centered to this particular router. And once that is done, we can now put the particular cutter we want to use in the router. And for this first part, where I'm going to be creating the hole, I've got a 24mm guide bush and my 8mm cutter. And the template has a 60mm diameter. Now, the material which I'm going to be cutting is 10mm thick. Now, in order to get the right depth of cut, you push down on the router until the cutter hits the top of the material you're going to cut. Push down this little gadget here. Most routers have these, and make sure that the little measuring gauge, which you can probably just see here, is set to 0. And now all we're going to do now is to lift this up so that is at the 10mm mark. If you look now, you'll see that as I push down here, there's a gap underneath that post there of just over 10mm. So that should now give us the right cut depth. So remember, this is the cut we do to create the hole. So we're going to take out all of the material inside. My right is set up, my dust extractor is set up, I've got my ear defenders on, and away I go. Everything's clamped down, so we should be good to go. You may be able to see that looks like a pretty good hole to me. I'm just going to give it one more quick check. You do have to watch. You may, when you're cutting holes, get a little bit that breaks off and that can interfere with the progress. And so every now and again, you need to stop the router, have a look inside and make sure everything's nice and clean. And the other thing to watch out for is that you don't get a build-up of dust on the outer side of the guide ring, which causes its guidance around the template to be ruined, really, offset by too much. So anyway, that's our first bit. Now we're cutting a plug this time. That means we want the piece in the middle as I go around the template. I don't want that piece in the middle to start flying off and hitting the cutter, so I have used some double-sided sellotape to hold it down in place. This time I've got my 10mm guide ring, which has been centered with the mandrel, and I've now got a 6mm cutter. Now the issue in this stage is that because the dust collection in this area is not very good, there's not a lot of places that the air can go through, I've got to make sure I don't get a build-up of dust that stops the guide ring from keeping absolutely tight against the template. So I've got to watch that. Also, I've got to make sure that the guide ring is always in contact with the template, because the piece I want is in the middle. I've set the depth in the same way I did before. You saw me get rid of some of that dust then. Well, that's it. So that's the double-sided tape. Right, let's give this a try and see how it fits. It's pretty tight. Now you see that's a pretty good fit. I've just got a tiny little bit of a gap there. That's probably technique on my part, as this is the first one I've done for a very long time. But you can see that's beautiful around that edge up there. So there we go. Template work is quite easy, really. Now I hope I didn't rattle through that too quickly or take it too pedestrianly slow, and I hope that gives you now the basics of template work. Now I'll just reiterate the key things I think are essential, and that is to use the same units for your template, for your guide bushes and for your cutters. And if you do that, life is a lot easier. And in the next video, which will take me a little while to do because there's quite a bit of work involved, I'll be showing you how to make your own templates from scratch, and that will be using just ordinary workshop equipment. The final video, the third one, will show you how to make templates using a CNC, which for those people who've got access to a CNC, whether they own it themselves or have got a friend who's got one, you'll find that quite useful. Many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.